My name is Claire Matthews, 41 years old, and I'm sitting across from the man who vowed to love me forever. Now laughing as he signs the divorce papers like it's a joke. "You can keep the house, Claire," he says, smirking loud enough for the gallery to hear. I've already upgraded to something younger and tighter. The courtroom chuckles. The judge doesn't flinch. But I do. Not in shame, not in pain, in silence. Because what my ex-husband doesn't know is that I already own the house he just bought. The one he flaunts in front of me. The one where he thinks he's starting his brand new life. And I'm about to collect the first month's rent. If you've ever been humiliated in public, if someone ever thought they could laugh while stepping on your heart, I need you to stay with me. Tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to rebuild quietly while someone else gloated too loud, then you're going to feel every second of this story. So go ahead, hit subscribe, because this one is for every woman who stayed silent until the moment she didn't. Let me take you back to the day my marriage died with a ringtone. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just gotten off a client call when my phone buzzed on the counter. I was still in my robe. No makeup, messy bun, coffee gone cold beside me. My husband, Tyler, was out of town. At least that's what I thought. The notification wasn't a text. It was a transaction alert. $3,850 charged to our joint card at Bespoke Hotel and Spa, Ocean View. I blinked twice. I hadn't booked anything. Tyler was supposed to be in Chicago for a finance seminar. At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe a client dinner? A mistake? Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. That's what I told myself, until I clicked the photo tagged by someone named Jessabelle. It was public. Her profile was full of duck lips and champagne and hashtags like Stachis and Herspa and New Beginnings. In the photo, Tyler was shirtless and smiling, holding her hand. I stood in the kitchen with my phone trembling in my palm, the quiet hum of the fridge suddenly too loud. I wasn't crying. Not yet. Just frozen. That photo cracked something in me. Not because he cheated, but because he was careless enough to do it loudly. To embarrass me. To parade it. I didn't scream. I didn't call him. I didn't even unfollow her. Instead, I sat down and opened a fresh spreadsheet. That night, I cooked dinner. I set the table. I even poured him wine. When Tyler got home, 2 days early, he looked surprised to find me smiling. I didn't mention the hotel. I didn't mention Jessa. Instead, I asked, "How was the seminar?" He blinked, hesitated, then said, "Productive. You know, just boring financial stuff." He kissed my cheek like nothing had changed, and I let him. But I noticed he didn't take off his ring. That was the moment I realized I was married to a performance. Tyler didn't love me. He loved the status, the image. I was the accessory that came with his success. But if he wanted a new narrative, I'd let him write it. I just wouldn't tell him I'd already started my own. A week later, he officially asked for a divorce. Said he wanted to move on peacefully. Said we'd grown apart. Said he'd support me emotionally and financially until I landed on my feet. Support me. As if I'd ever been standing on his. He didn't know I'd been managing the accounts in silence for years. That while he was chasing hedge funds and models, I was investing in duplexes, flipping rentals, turning inherited land into equity. I didn't brag. I didn't need to. I just worked. Quietly. While he underestimated me. Publicly. The house he bought for him and Jessa? It wasn't his. It was mine. On paper, through a trust, purchased months before the affair even began. He never checked who Properties LLC really belonged to. He just wanted something flashy and fast. I gave it to him. With interest. The divorce proceedings were a theater. He strutted in with his gold watch and spray tan, with Jessa seated in the back row, blowing him kisses. He made a show of refusing alimony, called me a queen truly, with a wink to the audience. Even made a joke about my age. And the judge, he just raised an eyebrow. You see, Judge Ellis wasn't just an impartial observer. Years ago, when I bought my first property at auction, it was a crumbling Victorian I had gutted and rebuilt from the studs. He was the seller. Back when he was still climbing the bench and needed to offload some debt quietly. I saved that house. He never forgot that. And when his daughter needed a private place to stay during her divorce, I gave her the keys to my guest home, no questions asked. That guest home now pays dividends as the very LLC that owns Tyler's new dream mansion. Everything had come full circle. So as Tyler laughed, waving the pen like a magic wand to erase our decade together, I just stared at him, because that's the thing about arrogance. It never checks the fine print. It signs without reading. And I wrote the contract. Before the betrayal, before the court, before the laughter that still echoes in my chest, there was quiet. Not peace, not exactly, but a soft, worn-in rhythm that I mistook for love. Mornings started with Tyler's alarm, not mine. He had a firm belief that the person who made the most money in the house should also control the mornings. His words, not mine. So, I rose when he rose. Made his coffee how he liked it. French press, medium roast, splash of almond milk. No sugar. Even when I was exhausted or had a headache, I did it. Not because I was submissive, because I believed in service, not servitude. There's a difference. I thought that's what marriage meant. You show up. Every day. Especially when it's inconvenient. While he dressed in his tailored suits, talking to his phone about margins and IPOs, I packed his lunch. Not because he asked me to, because I cared. I kept the house humming in the background. Grocery lists, dry cleaning, birthday cards for his clients' wives. I handled it all. And I was good at it. Invisible, but essential. Like the foundation of the very home he now thought he owned. I wasn't always this composed. I used to dream loud. I wanted to be an architect, had notebooks full of sketches, tiny homes with hidden staircases, sustainable spaces with repurposed materials. When we first met, Tyler said he loved that about me. Called me his little visionary. But the closer we got to marriage, the quieter he seemed to want that voice. He'd raise an eyebrow whenever I mentioned going back to school. Babe, student loans. At our age, he'd say with a half smile. Why not focus on flipping that old place your aunt left you instead? That's a better return. And so I did. One property turned into two. I handled the listings, the renovations, the bookkeeping. All in the background of his real career. He called it my hobby, even though I cleared nearly $80,000 profit my second year. He never asked about it again. We'd go to company events and I'd stand there in heels that hurt, smiling as he introduced me as his rock, or the reason he gets up in the morning. But it always felt rehearsed, like he was reciting a thank you speech to a support staff member, not introducing his wife. One time, at a holiday party, his boss asked me what I did. I told him I'd just finished remodeling a duplex in Brookhaven and was working on getting it rented. Tyler interrupted before I could finish. She's got a great eye for color, he said with a tight laugh. She should have gone into interior design. I didn't correct him. I just nodded and sipped my wine. That was a small moment. A quick one. But those are the moments that slowly tighten around your throat. You don't notice until you're breathless. The emotional neglect wasn't loud. Tyler never hit me, never yelled, never even raised his voice. No, his weapon of choice was charm. He dripped in it. Everyone loved him. Waiters, neighbors, old women at the gym. He made people feel important in a way that made you question whether you were overreacting when he ignored you. He forgot my birthday once, claimed he was closing a deal, and showed up at 11:30 p.m. with a bottle of wine and a tired kiss. The wine was already open. I knew it wasn't for me, but he kissed my forehead and said, "Happy birthday, baby. You're still my everything." And I believed him, because I wanted to. My days were full but small. Mornings of emails and tenant check-ins, afternoons of sanding floors or chasing after a leaky pipe. Nights were often solo. Tyler traveled a lot, or so he said. I filled the empty space with books, late walks, and audio courses on real estate and finance. I wasn't building an empire. I was just surviving, creating something of my own, because I needed to feel like more than a shadow. He didn't see that, but that's okay. I wasn't doing it for him. I remember one night, curled on the couch with blueprints scattered around me, I told him, I think I'm going to start an LLC. Keep things more separate and protected. Maybe even hire a part-time assistant. He barely looked up from his phone. If it makes you happy, babe, that was it. Not curiosity, not encouragement, just permission. As if my autonomy was a favor he granted. We didn't fight often. Tyler hated conflict. He preferred sarcasm over confrontation. If I brought up feeling lonely or needing more connection, he'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry I'm out making money while you're picking out backsplash tiles." He thought he was joking. I laughed too, at first. Then I stopped bringing it up. Because nothing changes when you talk to someone who's already decided what your role is. And still, I loved him. Or maybe I loved who I thought he was. The man I met 10 years ago, the one who helped my aunt with her groceries before ever asking for my number, the one who danced with me barefoot in our first apartment kitchen to Van Morrison and said he'd never stop choosing me. I held on to that man long after he disappeared. Looking back, the signs were all there. The separate bank account for business expenses only. The late nights that turned into early mornings. The unexplained hotel rewards points. I saw them, but I refused to interpret them, because if I admitted the truth, I'd have to admit I'd wasted a decade. But now, I don't see it as wasted. I see it as research, as groundwork, as the quiet stacking of bricks that would one day build my freedom. I remember a day about a year before everything fell apart. I was in a hardware store covered in paint, hair pulled back, standing in line behind a man in a suit, not unlike Tyler. He looked at me and said, "You don't look like the type who owns property." I just smiled. That's the point. I paid in cash and left without another word. That's who I was before the courtroom, before the betrayal. A woman no one noticed, a woman who built quietly, who loved loudly, who made space for a man who never truly saw her. And when he finally left, he thought he was walking away from something broken. He had no idea he'd been living inside something unbreakable. It started with whispers. Not literal ones, but the kind you hear in your bones when something is off. Tyler began coming home later. His voice shifted too, softer, almost rehearsed. He smelled like unfamiliar cologne once, blamed a client's office. Another night he had glitter on his shirt cuff. Birthday party, he shrugged. Don't be weird. I wasn't weird. I was aware. There's a difference. The final fracture wasn't private. It was public, calculated, and humiliating. He made sure of that. We were at a fundraiser, one of those over-decorated galas where the air smells like too much perfume and old money pretending to be charitable. I wasn't even supposed to be there. Tyler invited me last minute after his assistant canceled. I wore an old black dress that I'd worn to 2 other events. He said nothing when I walked out of the bedroom. Not a compliment, not even a glance. When we arrived, he moved like a politician. Handshakes, back pats, laughter just loud enough to be heard. He didn't introduce me once. I was trailing behind like staff. When I finally broke into a conversation he was having with a group of investors, all men, one of them turned to me and asked, "And what do you do?" Before I could answer, Tyler laughed and said, "She builds dollhouses and chases after plumbers." The men chuckled. I smiled politely, feeling my ears burn. I said nothing, but something inside me shifted. Later that night, I found him on the balcony, phone in hand, whispering. Not business whispering, intimate whispering. The kind of voice that bends around secrets. I didn't confront him then. I just walked past him and looked at the stars. He didn't even flinch. The next morning, I checked the shared calendar. He'd blocked out the entire upcoming weekend with personal retreat. He never mentioned it to me. That weekend, I tracked the charge. Lakeview Chateau. a boutique resort known for wellness for two. I knew because it was on my list of possible short-term rental acquisitions. I also knew it wasn't cheap, and that you couldn't book a room there without a minimum 2-night stay. So I did what any woman with nothing left to lose would do. I drove there. I didn't scream. I didn't cause a scene. I waited, in the parking lot, watched from my car as he came out, hand in hand with her. She was younger, yes. Prettier? Maybe. But she moved like someone who'd never been told no. He kissed her like he'd never kissed me. Like he wasn't married. Like I wasn't real. I didn't cry. I documented. Photo, timestamp, license plate. Then I drove away, each mile peeling away the last layer of denial I'd been clinging to. I didn't say anything right away. I wanted him to believe I still didn't know. That was the only power I had left. The silence between discovery and confrontation. I needed time. Time to prepare. Time to calculate. Time to build a different kind of foundation. But Tyler? He wasn't done humiliating me. He started spending from our joint accounts without notice. Lavish dinners, jewelry I never saw, airfare to places I'd never been. When I questioned a charge from Opal Fine Jewelry, he said it was for a retirement gift for his assistant. She was 32, and not retiring. The tipping point, the moment the betrayal left bruises on my dignity, came during a dinner party at our house. He insisted we host, said it would be good for appearances. Half his team came, some of their wives. It wasn't formal, but it wasn't casual either. I made short ribs, set the table, lit candles. I wanted it to feel like something human. Halfway through the night, his hand lingered a little too long on his phone. He kept checking it, smiling at the screen. When someone asked what was so funny, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Just my future. She's hilarious." The wives caught my eye. Their smiles wavered. One even looked down at her plate. He stood, raised a glass, and said, "To upgrades, in business and life." Laughter. A few gasps. Someone whispered, "Isn't Claire right there?" I was. I stayed seated. I smiled, but I was done. He filed for divorce 2 weeks later. He said it was amicable, that we'd both grown, and that there was no villain here. He wanted to keep the beach condo, the BMW, and the art, the one painting I bought with my first commission check. He told me I could keep the house, as if it were a favor. He said, "You deserve it. You've always been great at making a home." No mention of the betrayal. No apology. Just condescension wrapped in charm. He told mutual friends I was handling it surprisingly well, that I was actually being mature for once, as if I'd ever been the immature one. That's when the rage set in. Not the loud, impulsive kind, the cold, organized kind, the kind that waits, the kind that watches. He thought he was getting away with it, that I'd quietly slip into some sad little life while he flaunted his new love and freedom. He mocked me in court, laughed in my face, believed he had broken me, but all he'd done was build my case, and he did it publicly, loudly, carelessly. He didn't just betray me, he disrespected me. And that's the kind of mistake you don't walk away from clean. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I didn't even argue when he filed for divorce. Tyler expected a fight, some dramatic meltdown he could weaponize later. But I gave him nothing, just a quiet nod, a signature where it was needed, and an unreadable expression that unsettled him more than any tears could have, because by then, I had stopped reacting and started recording. While Tyler flaunted his new relationship across dinner parties and digital timelines, I was moving in silence. I opened a new bank account in my name only, transferred what I legally could from our joint accounts, my earned income, my deposits, my investment dividends. Every cent was traced, justified, and protected. I made sure of it. I hired an attorney, not the aggressive headline-hunting kind, quiet, strategic, experienced in real estate law and asset protection. Tyler didn't even know I had a lawyer. He thought I was using a court-appointed mediator. He thought silence meant surrender. It didn't. It meant preparation. I began consolidating my properties. 3 rentals in my name, 2 in the LLC, 1 in a trust. I refinanced where necessary, liquidated where wise, and reinvested under new layers of ownership. I'd always had a talent for details. He just never noticed. To him, my work was a hobby. To me, it was independence. I transferred ownership of my aunt's home, the same one he once called a dump worth demolishing, into a trust managed by a holding company I quietly formed months earlier. That trust, Wren Hill Partners, would become very important soon. I didn't rush. I just aligned everything. Tyler, meanwhile, made a show of his new chapter. He took Jessa to Italy, bought her a car, posted photos of them wine-tasting in Napa, her diamond-heavy hand clinking glasses against his. He moved fast, because people like him need audiences. He didn't notice I wasn't watching, but I was. He didn't know I still had access to the old Gmail account he used for receipts. I'd helped him set it up years ago, and he'd never changed the password. There were invoices, home inspections, correspondence with a real estate agent, all pointing to a new house. A flashy one, modern and cold, with black iron gates and a 2-story foyer. I traced the address. I called the agent. And I smiled, because I already owned the lot next door. The house Tyler was buying? It sat on land previously divided into 3 parcels. The original developer defaulted years ago, and I picked up one of the lots during a foreclosure auction for a fraction of its worth. I'd planned to hold it. But now, it was leverage. I didn't interfere with his purchase. I didn't warn him. I just reviewed the zoning codes. And then I filed a construction permit to build a single-unit rental on my adjacent parcel, one that, by code, would require easement access through his driveway. I wasn't trying to stop him. I was just reminding him that I still existed. The moment I found out who owned his new house was the moment the game shifted. Properties LLC. I recognized it immediately, because I'd created it 2 years ago, originally for a flip I never ended up completing. My attorney had kept the entity active, just in case. Apparently, the realtor had transferred the title through a holding company that rolled it right back to Paradox, and never bothered to update the manager on paper. So while Tyler thought he was closing on a new chapter of his life, he was walking straight into my paperwork. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friend. There was power in the silence. Power in the slow, careful stacking of every detail. I was holding more than deeds. I was holding restraint. And Tyler? He was too loud to notice he was walking into a beautifully constructed trap. In court, he joked again, this time about how I still had access to the blender and should consider writing a cookbook for bitter ex-wives. I watched the judge's mouth tighten. I met his eyes and said nothing. Not because I was weak, because I was done giving him material. I'd always been underestimated, by Tyler, by his colleagues, even by the women who now whispered about me at luncheons. But I had something none of them did. Clarity. Tyler thought control looked like volume, like money, power, charm. But real control, the kind that can't be undone, it looks like a woman sitting still in a courtroom, knowing she owns the walls her ex is bragging about. I'd prepared every inch of this, quietly, legally, elegantly. And the best part? He still didn't know. I scheduled the first rent payment due date for the 1st of the following month. A paper notice would arrive at the property the day after he moved in. Formal, courteous, binding. But first, I had to let him celebrate. Because nothing makes a fall more poetic than the arrogance of thinking you're on top. Tyler moved into the house on a Sunday. He made sure everyone knew about it. There were Instagram stories of the champagne toast. A boomerang of him holding Jessa in the empty foyer, spinning her while she screamed with laughter. A caption that read, "New chapter, new kingdom." The furniture hadn't even arrived yet. But that didn't matter. Tyler had never needed comfort, only optics. Jessa posted a selfie from the balcony with the sunset behind her and the words, "Manifested it." I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. I just waited. 2 days after they moved in, the first envelope arrived. Cream-colored. Embossed. Addressed to current occupant. Inside was a formal letter from Wren Hill Management Group, notifying the tenants of the finalized lease terms for the upcoming year. Rent was due on the 1st of the month. Late fees would apply after the 5th. Standard stuff. Except one paragraph in the middle. Please note that the property at 221 Wexley Lane is legally owned by Paradox Properties LLC, whose managing partner is Wren Hill Management Group. Any use of the premises without a lease agreement on file will be treated as trespassing and pursued accordingly. Tyler called me that evening. "What the hell is this?" I was sautéing garlic when his name popped up. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello? Claire, did you send this letter to my house?" "Your house?" I said gently. "You mean the one owned by Paradox Properties?" Silence. Then, "What the fuck does that mean?" I wiped my hands on a towel and walked over to my folder. Opened it. Found the printout I'd been saving. "I'm listed as the managing partner of Paradox. You didn't know that? You're lying. You should check the closing documents, Tyler, or your title insurance policy." He went silent again. I let it sit. Simmer. Finally, I added, "Rent's due in 5 days." That week, he tried everything. He called the real estate agent, who was just as shocked as he was. He called his bank, who confirmed the wire transfer had gone through but couldn't reverse it. He called a lawyer, but the lawyer told him the LLC structure was airtight, and he'd purchased the home from a legal entity without ever asking who controlled it. It didn't matter that he used his money. Ownership isn't about payment. It's about paper. He sent Jessa to talk to me. She showed up at my door unannounced. I opened it just enough for her to see I was calm and alone. "Claire, this is insane. Tyler says you tricked him." I smiled. "Did he tell you who signed the deed?" She blinked. "The seller was Paradox." "Correct. And Paradox was mine." She narrowed her eyes. "You're doing this because you're bitter." "No," I said, voice even. "I'm doing this because I'm owed." She swallowed hard. "You can't really evict us. You're not even tenants. Legally, you're just squatting." And then I closed the door. I didn't evict him. I invoiced him. 3 days later, a notice appeared taped to the front door. First month's rent due, $8,200. A reminder of the late penalty. An enclosed direct deposit slip. Professional, polite, unshakable. He didn't pay. So I filed with the court. Not for eviction, for breach of contract and unauthorized occupancy. The home had never been transferred to his name. The deed, the structure, the LLC, all perfectly legal. And the best part? I'd sent him a courtesy copy of the lease agreement prior to the sale, buried in fine print within the disclosure packet. He'd never read it. Because arrogance doesn't read. His lawyer tried to negotiate. He offered to buy the house, outright. I declined. He offered a cash settlement. I declined. He accused me of entrapment, and the judge laughed. Because I'd followed every rule, every law, every regulation. Tyler had mocked me in court. He had publicly humiliated me. And now, he was legally living in my house, under my terms, paying me rent, or facing removal. By month 2, he caved. He wired the funds to Wren Hill Management Group. The memo line said nothing. Just silence. Beautiful, heavy silence. He stopped posting on Instagram. So did Jessa. The moving truck came 2 months later. I watched from my car as they packed boxes. There was no celebration this time. No champagne. No spinning balcony videos. Just cardboard and silence. He saw me through the windshield. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just looked at him, and he looked away. Later that evening, I walked through the house. My house. It still smelled like expensive cologne and half-lived dreams. In the master bedroom, I found a velvet box hidden under the sink. A ring, not my size. I left it there. I had no interest in keeping anything, only restoring everything. The next day, I signed a new lease to a young couple expecting their first child. She cried when she saw the nursery. He asked if he could plant roses in the backyard. I said yes. People asked if I ever missed Tyler, missed the life, the dinners, the vacations. No, because what he took from me was never love. It was clarity. And once you have that, there's no going back. He thought he could rewrite the story, but I held the pen. And in the end, all I gave him was the bill. It didn't happen in a courtroom. Not this time. It happened in a lobby. The annual Wallace Foundation Gala, 6 months after the final rent payment cleared. I hadn't planned to go. I never did. Those events had always been Tyler's stage, not mine. But this year, I got a personal invitation from the new director, a woman I'd once helped during her own ugly divorce. I almost declined, but something in me wanted to see. Not him. The room. I wanted to see if it would feel different now that I wasn't standing in his shadow. I wore navy, not black, not red, something that whispered power, not begged for attention. The room was full of expensive teeth and aging money, the same kinds of people who once called me Tyler's wife and nodded right through me. Only this time, they looked at me like someone they should have remembered. He was already there. I saw him before he saw me, standing by the champagne tower, back straight, hand gripping a flute too tightly. Alone. His suit fit tighter than I remembered. His smile was smaller, his hair grayer at the temples. He scanned the room as if he still owned it. And then our eyes met. He hesitated. Just half a second. But I saw it. That split-second glitch. Recognition met with discomfort. The pause where he remembered how our last chapter ended and how publicly it turned. I didn't look away. I walked forward. Not toward him, just past him. Calm, collected. Not a hair out of place. I didn't stop. I didn't greet him. But as I moved by, I saw his jaw clench. And I knew. The silence was deafening. 10 minutes later, I felt him approach. I didn't need to turn to know. There's a particular shift in the air when someone tries to gather dignity from shards. "Claire," he said, voice low. I turned slowly, raised an eyebrow. "Tyler." He gave a tight smile. "You look... well." I returned the smile. A soft, unreadable curve. "I am." He swallowed. "So you're still doing real estate?" Still, as if I'd ever stopped. "Yes," I said, "and managing some properties. Quiet work." "Right," he muttered, shifting. "I heard about the... situation." "Which one?" That shut him up. He cleared his throat. "Look, I don't want things to be awkward. We were married for a long time. There's no need for..." "For what, Tyler?" I asked gently. He didn't have an answer. I watched him. He looked thinner, tired. That charming smirk he used to wear like armor. Gone. In its place, uncertainty. For the first time, he wasn't performing. He was just a man facing the consequences of not reading the fine print, literally and figuratively. I didn't gloat. I didn't twist the knife. I just stood still. Because grace is louder than revenge. A few people nearby had turned to look. They didn't know the story, not fully, but they could sense the tension. The way Tyler's voice faltered, the way mine didn't. He noticed too. "I just think," he said, fumbling, "we both got what we wanted in the end." I tilted my head. "Did you?" A flicker of shame passed across his face. He tried to recover. "You always were smarter than I gave you credit for." "That's true." He laughed nervously, expecting the old Claire to soften, to smile, to reassure. But I didn't. I let the moment breathe. I let him feel it. That this was the mirror. This was him, standing where I once stood, searching for approval and getting none. "You know," he said finally, grasping for control. "Jessa and I didn't work out." I looked at him, just looked. "Turns out she wanted more." I nodded slowly. "They often do." He blinked. I didn't fill the silence. I let it stretch between us like a chasm. A dozen people now lingered, pretending not to listen. One woman whispered to her husband. Another tilted her glass toward me. The room had shifted. He could feel it too. He sighed. I've made a lot of mistakes. I didn't reply. He said it again, louder this time. I know I messed up. Still, I said nothing. And that was the final break. Because Tyler had always been fueled by attention, by engagement, by the certainty that his voice mattered more than the moment. But now, he was talking to someone who no longer needed anything from him. Not money, not closure, not even an apology. He wasn't the center of this story anymore. He was just a chapter. And he was finally realizing it. He stepped back, cleared his throat. Anyway, good seeing you. You too. He turned and walked away. Slower than he arrived. Lighter, maybe. Or smaller. I didn't watch him leave, because this time, I wasn't the one left behind. The room returned to motion. Laughter, glasses clinking. But a few people came up to me. One woman touched my arm and said, "Was that your ex?" I remember the story. You handled that beautifully. I smiled. I know. And I meant it. Not out of pride, but out of peace. I kept one photo from our marriage. It was taken on a summer afternoon, 6 years into our vows, during a barbecue in our old backyard. Tyler had one hand on my waist and the other holding a beer, his smile halfway between charming and cocky. I wasn't looking at the camera. I was looking at him. That part always stung the most. I was so clearly in it, completely. Last week I found it in the bottom drawer of a file cabinet I hadn't opened in months. I stared at it for a long while. Then I slid it into an envelope, sealed it, and labeled it. Proof of life. No return to sender. I didn't throw it out. Some things deserve to be tucked away, not erased. My house feels different now. It's quiet in the morning in the best way. I hear birds again. I smell the coffee as it brews. Real coffee, not the kind I made for someone else. There are no voices bleeding through the walls, no tension woven into the baseboards. Just stillness. Sometimes, when I walk barefoot through the kitchen, I catch myself smiling for no reason, not because something happened, but because nothing did. Peace is like that. It doesn't arrive with a trumpet. It slips in like sunlight under a closed door. I painted the walls a soft gray blue, refinished the floorboards, switched the blinds to sheer linen. It's subtle, but it feels like breathing, like finally exhaling after holding my breath for years. I write more now, not for anyone else, just for me. Journal entries, short essays. Once, I even outlined a memoir, not about Tyler, but about rebuilding. What it means to be quiet and underestimated. What it means to rise anyway. I don't know if I'll publish it. That's not the point. The point is, I'm hearing myself again, and I like what she has to say. A few weeks ago, I drove past the street where Tyler's dream house still sits. Someone else lives there now. A young family. I saw bikes out front, chalk drawings on the driveway, a soccer ball in the yard. I didn't slow down, but I did glance at it in the rearview mirror, and felt nothing. Not anger, not smugness, just stillness. Because the best revenge was never the house, never the rent, never the silence that followed his arrogance. The best revenge was waking up one morning and realizing he no longer takes up space in my mind. I left him with everything he asked for. The BMW, the social circle, the image. But I walked away with something he'll never know how to earn. Self-respect. He doesn't call anymore. I think he knows he's already said everything worth saying. I don't wish him harm. I don't wish him anything. Indifference is freedom. There's a letter I wrote during the worst part of it, right after I saw the photo of him and Jessa at the lake. I never sent it. It's still in my nightstand drawer, folded neatly. I read it once a year. Not to remember the pain, but to remind myself how far I've come. The last line reads, "This will not define me. I will not let someone else's carelessness become my identity. I keep it there not as a scar, but as a certificate. Proof of survival. Proof of rebirth." I don't go to as many events these days. I don't need to prove I belong anymore. The people who matter already see me. The rest don't matter. I host dinners sometimes. Real ones. Friends, neighbors, even tenants. We sit on the patio, candles lit, soft jazz playing from a speaker by the herbs. It's not glamorous. It's good. Someone asked me recently if I'd date again. I said, eventually, but I'm not rushing. I want something real. Not because I need to be saved, but because I've already done the saving for myself. One morning, I walked down to the beach alone, coffee in hand, barefoot in the sand. The tide was low, the breeze was soft. I sat on a rock and watched the sky change, and I whispered 2 words under my breath. Thank you. Not to him, not to the universe, not even to God in the conventional sense. Just, thank you. For the lessons. For the fall. For the strength I didn't know I had. Because what came after wasn't a happy ending. It was something better, a peaceful beginning.